Wisconsin. We'll do a quick roll call. Myself, Chairman Webster, I'm here. Roll call. Myself, Chairman Webster, I'm here, obviously. Alderman Nelson is not here. Commissioner Woznicki.
Here.
Commissioner Porter.
Here.
Commissioner Specht is not here. Commissioner Witt. Commissioner Skoronsky.
Here.
Alderman Nelson has just arrived, so we'll mark him in. Assistant City Engineer Beinlich.
Here.
City Engineer Morrow.
Here.
Highway Superintendent Schleider is here.
Here.
And so the only absent person. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, then we'll start with the reading and approval of the minutes from the April 12th meeting. I think there was a number of individuals who weren't here that night, if I recall. So, here that night, if I recall. So,
Well, I was.
yep, so
The motion to approve.
to approve as presented by Commissioner Porter. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Alderman Nelson. Excuse me. All of those in favor of that motion, aye.
Aye.
Any negatives? Not hearing any negatives, that will pass. We'll open a public comment period if anybody here wishes to speak. And then we're going to move on to item 5A, which is our ADA transition plan. I kind of read through this. What it kind of looks like to me is that we have a self-evaluation that kind of defines in terms of disability access throughout the city. A lot of it has to do with sidewalks and entrances and so forth, so sidewalks. And that we've defined a lot of locations. And it sounds like the next thing to do is try to implement some sort of a plan to correct some of those issues. Is that the gist of what I'm seeing here?
It's
What is the
pretty-
gist of this?
Pretty good gist of it, but I'm going to let Assistant City Engineer
Okay.
Tyler Beinlich.
Yeah, so there's a memo kind of giving a breakdown of what's included in the draft plan, but essentially, yeah, we had 2 summers ago, we had our intern go out and she checked primarily just sidewalks and curb ramps in the right of way that the city maintains. And if you look through the plan on pages 6 and 7, I'm going to show you what some of those deficiencies are that she looked for and what she took measurements on. A lot of it comes down to slope and the curb ramp itself that leads from the sidewalk down to the road where the crossing is. So the city is a public entity with more than 50 employees. Have a ADA transition plan. Now this draft plan is really only for what engineering deals with, so public right away. I kind of noted it in the bottom of the memo, but we'll have to work with the department or with administration to put this together with their own plan that would cover city facilities like City Hall and police and fire, where public has access to the walkways around the buildings and things like that. This doesn't get into anything like that. This is primarily just sidewalks and curb ramps. So yeah, I guess the plan primarily just sidewalks and curb ramps. So yeah, I guess the plan, like you touched on, is really was a data gathering and kind of a way for us to get an inventory of where we're at. And the goal is to try and basically make improvements every year as part of our road program, update curb ramps. The sidewalks are going to be a little bit trickier because there are long stretches where we might not be able to fit it into our budget, so we may have to look at an alternative method for that. But yeah, I mean, really it's on it right now. And the next step would be to work with administration and any other departments to kind of come together for a citywide plan.
If I could add, it's important to note that every year in our annual road paving program, we have to address the adjacent curb. Things better for the people with automobiles. We have to make things better with folks traveling those same routes who, are on
Yeah,
foot
so
and have various
it's a
disabilities.
DOJ requirement, the Department of Justice and US DOT requirement that anytime we do a resurfacing or alteration, so our typical mill and pulverize and over that, our new seal coating stuff that we're doing, that doesn't fall into that. If, DPW is going out and pothole patching, that doesn't fall into that. It's really when you're changing the profile of the road with the mill and resurface. You are required to improve or update any curb ramps with a pedestrian crossing, so required to improve or update any curb ramps with a pedestrian crossing, so that kind of goes along into it. With the requirements from the ADA Act, there's not really a timeline laid out that we have to have this completed in 20 years. It's just more of that completed in 20 years. It's just more of that they want the municipalities to have a plan to correct any deficient ADA facilities. So this is our plan to work through the right-of-way ADA facilities, sidewalks, and curb ramps.
We will be taking comments, so probably later this year, we would like to have with the administration, have someone adopt the plan, just to say that we officially have a plan, so in case anyone were to look for it, it is here. We have done it. We have completed it.
So, I would assume that other entities, so for instance, we have the buildings plan. I'll call it the buildings plan because I don't know any other way of describing it, but city buildings and facilities, and file those with the ADA as well. I assume somebody would be in charge of generating that plan. Where does this go, is my question.
So we did have a company come in last year, or maybe it might have been the year before, and looked at all the sidewalks around, maybe it might have been the year before, and looked at all the sidewalks around, in and around buildings, came inside the buildings and looked to make sure that, everything was ADA accessible. So I can't remember the full name of the company, but their abbreviations they go by is the IRS. It's I don't remember the name of the company, but that's the initials IRS. So we have an IRS plan that talked about the roofs, but then they also did an evaluation for so really we just need to take our plan, that plan, combine them together and make sure it's in one document so that folks can find it if they were looking for it.
Peggy, the Director of Administration, I've talked to her a few times about
Okay.
we'll come together at some point in the future and kind of merge the two, or
So
maybe there'll be two separate
that's where I'm coming
documents.
from. So
But
this is your document, and eventually the idea is that the city will have some sort of more inclusive document that will include facilities and whatever.
correct, yeah. Yep.
What about like parks? I think of the one over on 35th Street, the
Kayla's?
Kaylee's. What do we have to? What about dealing with those types of situations?
We have not done a full inventory of all of our parks. I think some of them were touched on with the IRS study, but not all of them. So that's probably part of the discussion with the administration is figure out what gap, figure out who's responsible to get those done.
Okay. And another question is, because as I noticed through here, looking through it, we have a number of, you use the term deficiencies, I'll utilize the same term. Looking at like Loomis Road, Ryan Road term, looking at like Loomis Road, Ryan Road, Rawson Avenue, 76th Street, which are either Milwaukee County or state of Wisconsin that we've got identified deficiencies upon. Do we have to provide the county or the state with that type of information then? Provide the county or the state with that type of information then about those plans? What's that process?
I would say no, we don't provide them. So when the state or the county does a project, we either we build the sidewalk or they build it for us and turn it over to us. So they sidewalk or they build it for us and turn it over to us. So they are our responsibility to maintain, own and maintain. So just because there's a sidewalk in state or county right of way, it's ours to maintain.
Okay.
We're responsible for it.
Is there a maintenance schedule on rechecking to redetermine here or that raises there and we now have a new deficiency?
So
How's that work?
So we do get complaints, if there's a tripping hazard. If tripping hazard, we send DPW out. We've got a little grinder that,
Right,
we grind
I've
them
seen
back
those.
into place. If it's an issue that we say it's sunk, we need to replace it, we try to get that scheduled as early fitted in our schedule and we get it done.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions or comments? Commissioner Witt?
In your program, like, how long is this going to take? 10 years, 20 years?
So I think, I don't think that, at least I understand, I don't think that, at least I understand, talking with federal highway folks, there is no specific, it must be done in X amount of years. I think 20 years is a reasonable amount of time. They think it's not practical for us to say it's going to take us 100 years to get this fixed. On the other hand, they don't expect us to get it all fixed in 5 years. So 20 years is kind of a good schedule that we're trying to maintain. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, Franklin really doesn't have a lot of sidewalks.
Yeah, because only are certain right-of-way roads and sidewalks, but
Yeah.
normal subdivisions, we don't put the walks in unless they're a 60-foot right-of. Is there a federal grant that can be applied for this?
I'm not aware of any because every single city and municipality is required to do this.
Pardon me?
I don't believe so. I believe every single city of any size is really required to do this. And even smaller cities. I don't know if I've shared this with this board or not, but I don't know if I've shared this with this board or not, but I'm familiar with a very small city. I think population about 7,000 in Brazil, Indiana. They had someone complain about he was had some disabilities and he's complaining about he couldn't get around town because they had not done a policy like this. They were able to jump straight from the local courts straight to federal courts, and then they treat it as a civil rights violation. And so the judge made a quick decision. It was entirely upon building appropriate sidewalks throughout the city. And unfortunately, they tried to do it on the cheap, and they didn't do it right. So then someone came in and measured everything, and it was all wrong. So they basically had to almost redo everything that they did. So it's a huge mess for a small city. So we definitely don't want to go there. We want to make sure we try to stay in.
I've been putting them in since they came into effect in this territory. And then when they first came in effect, nobody knew how to put them in correctly. Now we all figured that much out. And there are some that are in the city that are actually installed incorrect. With the angle of the radius and whatnot like that. That you're not going to replace that, would you? Or would you just wait till you get a complaint or something to that effect?
Yeah, you have to look at it case by case basis. So, for example, Milwaukee, they got sued. They went through and they did a lot of, almost every year they tweaked the requirements some. So when that curb ramp was put in, it may or may by case basis. So, for example, Milwaukee, they went through, they got sued. They went through and they did a lot of, almost every year they tweaked the requirements some. So when that curb ramp was put in, it may or may not have been in compliance, but then because the rules change, it's now no longer in compliance. So they kind of have to use their judgment, which is worse to fix one. They kind of have to use their judgment, which is worse to fix one that's really bad or to fix one that's not quite in compliance. So it's one of those things you have to make judgment calls on.
Because like now I see they came up with, when you got a real long radius, like at the ballpark, they've made them so you could put 5 together with a radius in them.
Yep.
You've seen that?
Technology changes, but the rules are changing too. Every year they change.
So there are some curb ramps that were maybe installed in 2009 that if they met the requirements then and they still would meet those requirements from 2009 today, even though they don't meet today's requirements, they can be left in and they still meet the standards. But the plan really is not to go around and do spot replacements unless there's a complaint that's a serious issue. I mean, the plan is, financially, it makes the most sense and with our budget to do it as our road program goes. So, you know, when we're resurfacing a street, there are curb ramps on 4 intersections, we're gonna do those.
Just don't put. That's it. That's my question.
Do you want a motion to place on file, or is this?
Again, we appreciate any comments, but yeah, you can place on file, and we'll probably come back to you maybe later this year when we're ready to adopt one document.
I'll make a motion on,
This year when we're ready to adopt one document.
I'll make a motion on receive and place on file.
I'll second it.
Okay. What would, so eventually I would assume this plan would have to then be adopted by like the council? Absolutely, and absolutely, and yeah. One of the things that you're saying the 20-year thing, the one thing that I've been thinking about as you were speaking is, you know, generally speaking, our roadways, we consider them to be like 30-year roads or 30, you know, and some are touched in between that 35 years, you know. So I'm not sure, but to me, that kind of stretches out your 20-year plan a little bit if you're assuming to go with the road plan. That's just one of my thoughts as we talked.
Again, keep in mind, only a small percentage actually have sidewalks, so it's entirely possible that maybe we, you know, one year our paving program doesn't touch a lot of sidewalks, but maybe we work on some sidewalks other locations.
And then the idea will be then to bring this back. We didn't really have a lot of comments. It was just kind of bring this back. We didn't really have a lot of comments. It was just kind of like a digestion tonight, to tell you
Sure.
the truth.
Open to any suggestions, comments. If you want to call me someday, or call Tyler, myself someday, and say, you know, I was looking at this, got some questions or comments. We'd love to field those comments.
Okay. Some form of a review publicly for this thing?
Other than appearing on public meetings like Common Council,
Just common council. Okay, I'm just curious, that's all. Any other questions from the board members?
I was going to chime in. I think for the larger scale 88 or public input required, so that will probably be part of that discussion with the administrator in the future. Yeah, I mean, at the very least, we can, if this one gets adopted separately, we can publish it on our website, and they'll have availability to give us any comments.
Would having this plan, at least in a draft form and in front of us, help us from a legal perspective if we got hit and taken to a court?
Most definitely. As I understand, if someone were to complain and we have everything set up locally, they are required to stay in local court, and we can. There's basically a process to work way through. So, for example, let's say I'm in a wheelchair. I don't like the fact that something exists the way it is. There should be a policy in place locally to go through my grievance process and to make sure that it gets fixed.
Okay.
If there is nothing in place, then that's like the Justin to make sure that it gets fixed.
Okay.
If there is nothing in place, then that's like the gentleman in Brazil, Indiana, you can jump straight to federal court and so forth.
One last question. This only pertains to existing access, like sidewalks and access to buildings or whatever. It only pertains to exist.
That's my understanding. So if someone were to say it's not right that there's not a way for me to get in my wheelchair from this to this because there's no sidewalk or pathway, they would have a tough time requiring that.
Okay.
I'm not
Thank you.
saying they couldn't, but it would be a lawsuit.
Okay. So we have Commissioner Porter to have engineering place this on file for further review. And if you have comments, to direct them back to Glenn or
Tyler.
Tyler. Thank you. I apologize. No, not Kevin. Okay. All of those in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Any negatives? Not hearing any negatives, that motion will pass. We'll move on to the next item, item 5B, which is the request for autistic child sign.
Chairman.
Child
Mr.
sign.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
after this was published, you should have received an amended.
I missed it then?
Okay, there is a warning sign policy I was hoping to discuss before the autistic sign.
I apologize. I haven't actually. I apologize. I haven't actually looked. It's been kind of rough. So, so we'll then go on to item 5B, which is now the draft non-regulatory sign policy, which is sitting here on our. The form itself is sitting.
So we talked about trying to do something, making some sort of a sign policy. And primarily, it occurred to me that really our big issue, obviously we have street signs, stop signs, and we have a policy, and I think we use that multiple times a year. You know, someone requests a stop sign and gives you guidance and so forth. So there are some other signs, really the ones that really, I want to say, give us the most pause are the requests for various warning signs. So I call them the critter crossing signs. And I will take blame for some of the turtle crossing signs. Some of the turtle crossing signs, that you see around town, and crane crossing signs and so forth. And after a few of those, it realized that you know what, that we're not really doing this right. In addition, we have people crossing signs that I want to say like people crossing signs that. I want to say like the slow children playing and so forth that you see all around town. Federal Highway has been telling cities to get rid of those for a good 20 years or more, and we still put them up with new subdivisions. In addition, we have requested like the one that's on your agenda, of the autistic sign. So what I've done, we've talked about trying to put together some larger document for all signs. And I thought, you know, we've already got one for stop signs. Let's just create another one for the warning signs. And initially I called it then. In fact, I think that's how it appears on your agenda. But then once I really got to writing this document, I realized that the Federal Highway Commission only talks about warning signs, not non-regulatory. So by definition, a warning sign is a non-regulatory warning sign. You can't get a ticket for violating a warning sign, if you will. So I've developed this warning policy, and this was emailed to you Friday morning. But I'd like to go through this in some detail, and if it's good to go, I'll take it to Common Council at the next meeting. If you want to hold on to it for another month, we can talk about it at the next meeting. If you want to hold on to it for another month, we can talk about it next month. But the policy purpose, we can walk through it and edit it if you have comments, you can stop me as we go. Policy aids in addressing the request of posting of warning signs in the city right-of-way. So keep in mind, this is in the right-of-way. This is save and so forth in their parking lot. These are really just signs in our right-of-way that they're warning the traffic of traveling public of various issues. There are some warning signs that are needed and placed per engineering standards and practices. Some signs are placed at the request of the public for special and unique hazards. And then Section 202 of the Wisconsin Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices states the usage and warning signs should be kept to a minimum. And we've had this discussion many times, is the fact of sign clutter. You know, people want to put signs up for everything, but when you start ignoring all signs. As the unnecessary use of warning signs tends to breed disregard for all signs, the overusage of signs may result in information overload for the motorist, which may negatively impact safety. So the organizations of person affected would be basically everyone, the all traveling public. References. I've talked to you many times about the MUTCD is what I call the Transportation Bible. This is the manual right here. This is the current version. It's a 2009 version. I know that they're in the process of updating this. Back in the day, every state would have its supplement. Back in the day, every state would have its supplement manual. So they would say, see section 2.0, whatever. I just wanted to let you know, because I just found this out about a month ago myself. If you were to just do a search on Wisconsin MUTC Manual of Uniform Traffic Control, the document, and what Wisconsin has done is kind of nice. They've you can look at the entire manual here, or each section that you'd like to look at. And what they've done is they've basically duplicated everything you see in here, but then with red text, they've actually put the Wisconsin version. So what the manual would look like for the national MUTCD, and then the Wisconsin version, they have some red text in here. So I printed all that out, just FYI, and this is how much paper you'd have to use if you were to do such on your own. But it is nice because it is here on the website. It's easily, and then there's the various chapters there. So Chapter 2C deals with the warning signs, and that's where we're at with this section. So warning signs, if you don't know, those are the yellow signs with black lettering, black text, and so forth. Just if you don't know, those are the yellow signs with black lettering, black text, and so forth. So let's go back to the document. So we also have the national MUTCD and the Wisconsin version of the document. So we also have the national MUTCD and the Wisconsin version of the MUTCD, Chapter 2C. And then a Municipal Code 245-9. Basically, it just says that we have the right to put up whatever sign we want to, allow that. So definition of regulatory sign, even though I don't use regulatory sign in the document, point out that regulatory sign talks about, tells the drivers what they should or should not do under given settings, like speed limits would be a good regulatory sign. Stoplight may result in a civil forfeiture, means you can get a ticket. The alternative is a warning sign. So these are the, if you will, suggestions. So a traffic sign that indicates a hazard ahead on the road that may not be readily apparent to a driver. These signs are typically diamond-shaped, square with a diagonal vertical with black legend and board. Signs include, but are not limited to, road alignment signs, no outlet signs, animal crossing signs, proximity to municipal parks, children playing, etc. There's no lawful penalty for violation of warning signs. So there's two categories, and I split them up into city-initiated warning signs and public-initiated warning signs. Warning signs and public-initiated warning signs. The city-initiated warning signs were warranted in the opinion of the city engineer, director of public works. The Department of Public Works is authorized and directed to procure, erect, and maintain appropriate traffic signs in accordance with the municipal code, so forth. So basically what I'm saying is that this is not. Basically what I'm saying is that this is not going to. So if there's a bridge hazard or a curve issue or whatever, we don't have to come to this board and get your blessing to put those up. We put those up just as needed as if you will, engineering judgment. Alternatively, there's a public city engineer, director of public works. Such warning signs may be requested by submitting a form for this purpose to the city engineering department. We've drafted that form and it's sitting in front of you tonight. The request will be placed in a Board of Works public agenda for discussion and decision. If the Board of Public Works discusses the matter and decides that the posting the request authorized and directed to procure, erect, and maintain appropriate traffic signs. When in the opinion and direction of the city engineer, director of public works, the sign is no longer warranted, the Department of Public Works is authorized and directed to remove said sign. So you may discuss, say, the autistic sign later tonight, if you were to decide that's appropriate. We have cattle crossing sign because let's say there's a farmer with a farm field. He regularly takes his cows across the road and so forth. If that farm field were to become a subdivision someday, no longer needed, we can take that down without coming back and trying to justify that. So the decision to remove signs may or may not be discussed at the Board of Public Works again. Obviously, if someone disagrees with us taking down, then they're welcome to reapply and come back and talk about the issue or so forth. Criteria for Board of Public Works to consider to warrant warning signs. So we have a few categories here, and if you can think of more categories, I'd be happy to write them in. Probably the most, and maybe one of your comments, maybe we want to reorganize these. But first one I put is the animal crossing signs. Animal crossing signs may include wild or domesticated animals. The first warrant, the animal under consideration should have a history of being in the roadway at that location. Number 2, the animal should have adequate mass to cause damage or injury to the driver.
Glenn,
Yes.
just for the record, I'm going to note that Alderman Nelson had to leave for whatever reason, so he's not here anymore.
Okay.
We still have quorum, so we'll go.
And time is 6:30. And then the animal, so number 2, this is one where, quite honestly, I was in fault for putting turtles and birds, although we don't want to hit turtles, putting turtles and birds, although we don't want to hit turtles and birds and other wildlife. The fact is it really doesn't cause a damage to the driver because they're not of large enough mass. But a deer or a cow or something like that would. That's per the guidance of the MUTCD. Damage or injury to the guidance of the MUTCD. Damage or injury to the animals should not be a consideration. So that's not a few months ago we had photographs of a geese that got hit, and somebody was concerned about the geese getting hit and so forth. But unless they're really injuring the driver, could cause the injury to the driver, we really should not be putting up a sign there. And then a review of accident history to traveling public should be reviewed. So, again, someone could say, all kinds of accidents have happened. Well, I've learned to sometimes when you check the official records, sometimes that's not always. Even though there's not really a warrant for this, I thought it was important to put this information in here. So, child at play, watch for children, slow children at all. Per the direction of the Federal Highway Administration, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, and other transportation organizations, I would tell you, Institute of Transportation Engineers was one of the shall. Studies have shown that these signs provide parents and children with a false sense of security that their children are safe when playing in or near the roadway. Studies have indicated no reductions in vehicle speeds or crashes with the children's signs present. Warning signs are most effective when they warn of consistent, not occasional conditions and children at a particular location in the street at all times. Playground and school zone signs are exempt from this policy. Special needs person. This, what you'll see later in the next one. So like autistic child, blind person at all. The special needs and ages of the persons and how the special needs and ages of the persons and how the conditions may warrant special warning to a driver. The configuration or other physical features of a roadway, right-of-way, i.e. is there a location of a pathway or sidewalk to keep a person safe? Is there vegetation that prevents the driver from clearly seeing a person who might be in the road? If warranted, the board shall establish a time limit for the sign. At the end of the time, the applicant shall reapply or the sign will be subject to removal. So this is really how we've practiced this in the past. So if, say, someone has an autistic child, for example, age would you, if you were to decide that a sign would be appropriate, at what age would that not be appropriate? So if the child is 2 years old now, maybe you say another, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever. But if the child were, say, 10 years old now, you say, by the time a child is 12 or 15, or whatever the age is, that's when maybe the sign should be removed. So you should consider that. And then the other catch-all, I'm sure there's something I'm not thinking of, but the other warning signs as requested. The above categories are not the other warning signs as requested. The above categories are not exhaustive of the warning signs. And one I thought of, but I didn't figure it was enough to justify its own section, but like a school bus ahead sign, we had that request a few months ago. I don't know if that's common enough to justify, but if I leave it general, I don't know if that's common enough to justify, but if I leave it general enough, we can discuss each one on a case-by-case basis. And then the warning sign may be requested on forms provided by the City Engineering Department. And again, the sample is in front of you. And when this happens, the city engineer, police chief, and other city departments shall consider the request and provide recommendations and opinions for the Board of Works to consider. So just like typically we would do the research, ask the police chief his thoughts, and so forth, and we would come to you and say, here's what the police chief said, here's what, this department says, and here's our opinion, and for you to make an informed decision. Again, I'm open to comments tonight. If you feel like it's close enough and good enough tonight, we can adopt it tonight. If you want to think about it another month and talk about it next month, that's perfectly fine. But I do feel like this is something we should act on fairly soon.
Well, I appreciate this. I think that it's, actually, I think it's pretty well put together. I would like to read it because I haven't read it. I'll be blunt.
Okay.
You might have emailed it.
Okay.
You might have emailed it out, but I haven't gotten my emails. Not that I haven't received them. I haven't looked at them. I do like the time frames on the children's signs and so forth that we've talked about. It has bothered me for quite a while, as I know of. I have probably, since I've been on this board, I can probably maybe 10 to 15 of these have come up relative to children, or relative to deaf child, autistic child, whatever they may be. I don't remember it ever actually happening. I think we've discussed it, but I don't remember that it ever actually happened.
I will tell you, we have discussed it, and I can tell you that Debbie is, again, not part of our official policy. She's been very good about following up. After a couple of years have gone by, she'll call, and sometimes they've moved.
Well, that's my big concern about
And
these.
they've
I'm glad to hear that.
That has happened, although it's not in
Frequent.
the policy anywhere. It's just matter of practice.
I'm glad to hear that. So I'm glad to see that on there, and I think that of all the things I see on here, I think that is something that this board should incorporate as we look at these signs for the future. So, so my own personal reference would be to table this for a month so that I could review it and we all could review it and come back and take a good look. But I'll let you guys, you gentlemen here, make a decision as to how you want to handle this for tonight.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
On your-
Commissioner Witt.
On your screen, you can show up that street, Kathleen Court. I just want to.
68th Drexel. It's this little, right here. So,
Now, does that cul-de-sac have sidewalks? It's got sidewalks on both sides, right?
yep, Kathleen Court.
Pardon me?
There is no sidewalk on 68th Street because
Right.
this is a corner house, but there is sidewalks on both sides of Kathleen Court.
And the house this child lives in is the corner house, you say?
This house, yes.
Okay, that's all I wanted to see. Thank you.
That'll be the next agenda item, but yeah.
Yeah. Well,
It's gonna weigh my,
I appreciate it.
it's got sidewalks.
Yeah, that's the question. Okay. I guess then, so I guess I would ask if, unless you guys here tonight wish to,
It's got sidewalks.
yeah, that's the question. Okay. I guess then, so I guess I would ask if, unless you guys here tonight wish to make a different motion, I would ask it be tabled for 1 month so we could review it and I could actually read it before I appreciate what you've gone through, but I would like a couple of minutes to digest it.
Oh, it's like that motion.
I can't make the motion. You have to make the, okay.
Okay.
So, okay. That helps me an awful lot. So Commissioner Witt makes the motion to table it. Okay, we'll give it to Commissioner Skronsky. And then all of those in favor of that motion, aye.
Aye.
Any negatives? Not hearing any negatives, that will pass. Let's see. Okay. And then we'll move on to the autistic child sign, the request for autistic child sign. We do have a letter in the back of our packet from Miss Roberts, Crystal Roberts. Who's going to take this one? Is that going to be you, Glenn? Or?
Yeah, so I think it's fairly self-explanatory. I don't know much more than what you can read in the email. So a lady is, I'm not sure if she's moving to Franklin. If you notice the Cold Spring Road, her phone pops up that if you notice the Cold Spring Road, her phone pops up that address, which is why that was entered. But she is living or is getting ready to move to the 6810 West Kathleen Court. So if you don't know where that's at, if you can imagine Drexel, 76th Street, you go down to 68th Street, and the very first cul-de-sac is on your left, and this house would be on the northwest corner. I believe it's an apartment complex. So you can see all the number of cars that are parked there. So she says that she has an autistic child. She'd like it. She has a 4-year-old son who's diagnosed on the spectrum around the age of 2. He is nonverbal and is very young, as she says 4. I'm looking to get a sign hung because she's concerned that the common fact of people in the autism spectrum have a high statistic of eloping, right from wrong, and that he is little. She feels that it's safest for him and all other drivers to be on alert for the worst case scenario. He attends ABA therapy on a regular schedule, has made huge improvements, but still he's only 4. So this is her consideration. So anticipated, I didn't anticipate you to probably adopt that last policy at a first glance, but hopefully it gave you some ideas of what you might think as far as if you were to consider this, are there other questions you might have? How long might you authorize this and so forth? So she did not fill out a form because we just made up the form basically today. So that's why this form wasn't given to her. But I guess that's the introduction and open up for discussion.
Wish to make a comment to start? Okay, I guess it's up to me. I am certainly not against this type of sign for this type of situation for a young, that they are obviously working towards making the young, or giving the young child enough education to understand the dangers that he may be in or she may be in. So I guess it's a 4-year-old son. I'm assuming they would be talking about 68th Street. Does that seem reasonable? See, this is my biggest issue with this, is I'm not exactly sure where the request is at. I'm assuming 68th Street, since that is the big one. And I guess I'm just curious as if I'm right. I guess I'm just curious as if I'm right on that, or I think there's a little more information that we really should have in this case. I wish you would be here this evening. I'm not willing to say no to it tonight, but I would like to get a little bit more. I think there's a little more information that we really should have in this case. I wish you would be here this evening. I'm not willing to say no to it tonight, but I would like to get a little bit more information out of her, is my thought process.
Yeah, so we can follow up with her to find out, does she want, so I would ask, my mind, it makes a difference, but I guess I'd ask you, does it make a difference? Maybe you may want to say only Kathleen Court you would entertain, but not on 68th or vice versa.
I'm thinking probably it's 68th Street is more of in that. That's why I'm asking the question. And I think before we can make a decision, I think we need to have a little bit more information about does she want 68th Street? Does she want Kathleen Court? Does she want, I don't necessarily believe Kathleen Court is probably necessary, but it probably necessarily believe Kathleen Court is probably necessary, but it probably wouldn't hurt. I don't know. I'm just asking, what is her thought process? Secondarily, because the address that she has on there, she's in the process of maybe moving. I'm not 100% positive. A Google on that address. I'd like to confirm the address that you have written down on this, so that we are confirming that we are in the right location.
It is. In fact, I put this on the agenda, and then someone else noticed that Cold Spring Court's not a Franklin address, so we called and verified.
Anybody else have a question or a comment based on what I've said? Commissioner Witt.
I had a question. I obviously I can read what an autistic child means. I'd rather leave the school because I like to read what an autistic child is. Can they walk as, does this child have to be pushed around everywhere you go? Can he walk? I don't know.
I think I am not a medical person.
Neither am I.
And I think that I think she made a point in here. She says on the spectrum, because I believe autism is defined on a spectrum, depending on what type of disabilities that the individual may have. They may have, I don't know if they have motor skill. Generally, I've seen motor skill issues. Generally, I've seen motor skill issues, but I just don't know where on that spectrum the child lies.
So may I suggest one of your questions may be what other issues? So she mentions nonverbal. So that basically, my experience with autistic kids who are nonverbal, they run around everywhere, they have a hard time communicating to them and from them. So I guess maybe that might be a question if you'd like for me to ask what other disabilities are in play here.
I apologize. I didn't do my homework to read this prior to today.
Well, yeah, I think the situation as appropriately as possible, and I think that's what we're attempting to do here. And I think by reaching out, Commissioner Porter.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor either, obviously, but my knowledge of autistic children is they tend to be impulsive, and they don't follow normal,
Cues
rules and stuff that most of us. So I think the concern is that the child may dart out into the road and not understand that there's risk involved in their actions, and I know a couple of kids that are autistic, and they're difficult
Yes.
to judge. It's like kind of dealing with a 2-year-old. They see something, they want to go for it, and they may, just without thinking, walk out in the road. Personally, I'd probably think that just without thinking, walk out in the road. Personally, I'd probably think that 68th Street would be more of an issue than Kathleen Court because it is a through traffic road.
Mm-hmm.
And people on Kathleen Court, which is a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, and it's right on the corner, they're going to be stopping anyway. But that's
How close is this to the park?
It's very close. Can you see who that lady is? Maybe her.
There also is a four-way stop.
Yeah, Drexel. Right, at 68th and Drexel, there's a
So
four-way.
the park is up here.
Park is there, so it's halfway between Drexel and the park.
Yep.
But that's a hill coming.
I think that is a hill, correct?
We built that road years ago, Kathleen Court, and it was always, what I remember.
Was that one of the roads that we cut when we did 68th Street?
We didn't cut this one.
We didn't cut that one, okay.
Yeah. Let's see.
We did repave 68th and
We-
Kathleen
yeah.
Court last year.
So you can see
Oh, wow.
so here's Kathleen Court.
And see, as you can see, there's a lot of vegetation there and a lot, and it's traffic moves down that road fairly well too, so.
Yep. So there's no sidewalk here. You point that out.
But like I said, the chances that she may be taking him to the park is certainly an issue, and So I guess my request would be to recontact her, verify the actual address and verify the location, and I am a little bit leery of asking for her, because I think
So-
that's a personal issue that we're not supposed to get into.
Well,
But the
it-
fact that she's brought this up, and I'm not saying no to it, I just want to make sure we have the right information.
I appreciate HIPAA laws and all those other rules that concerning folks' privacy. Not an employee, though, decision. So I would like to, with your permission, I'll ask her to attend next meeting.
We would certainly appreciate it.
And so I'll mention the board has some questions that she can answer and, be prepared to talk about, verify the address, where would she like the sign or signs, and then probably just describe the concerns based on his disability.
Should you, okay, I'm going to ask this. I would not be adverse, personally, to even say, she can bring her child with her so that we can get a visual idea if she's willing to do that, and I will make sure that she's first up in line, so that she doesn't have to deal with, the difficulties in being here with him, okay?
I'll be careful how I say that.
I understand.
Okay. I'll be careful how I say that.
I understand.
Okay.
I'm just giving you
Okay.
that I take things out of order, and so I would do that.
Out of order. You're out of order.
It almost seems like we'd be requiring to actually see the child to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
think
understand. That's probably not the right way to say it, but, and I understand. That's probably not the right way to say it, but,
So I will say that the board is very interested in what about this child is the concern that would affect traffic. So
yes, we're just very interested in that, and
I don't need to know his complete medical history and issues.
yeah,
I just,
we are willing to, I think, I can't speak for the rest of the board. I personally am willing to do something here, but I just need a little comfort on,
Sure.
for the continuation. So I would ask for a motion to table and reach out to
and perhaps
this next meeting in July just so we can get everything cleared up.
and if it truly is a rental, maybe the time limits might consider how long our lease is. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're looking for a motion to
A
table this?
motion to-
So you're looking for a motion to table
A
this?
motion to table this until July.
All right, I'll make that motion.
It was July the 12th.
I haven't even looked. I can give you that in a second here. July the 12th. You are correct. Okay, so we have Commissioner Porter making that motion, and it's seconded by Commissioner Skaronski. Commissioner Hickey? Wisniewski. I apologize. Okay. All of those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any negatives? Not hearing any negatives, that will pass. Okay, and then to kind of move, then B, July the 12th. Okay, and then I have it 6:54.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Porter. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Skaronski, all of those in favor?